I think we are on time, so I'll just start. Hey everybody, my name is Joseph, and I won't bore you with all of this stuff, but I'll bore you with something else. I'll tell you about what we created and why I want to share this with you. So I'm the founder of Pawn. Pawn is a lending protocol. Essentially, what we want to deliver is DeFi mortgages backed with any asset, fully on-chain, fully non-custodial, and for that, we kind of needed data. So the story starts with me basically trying to get a regular mortgage, coming to a bank, being like a crypto native, earning my salary in ETH, and then coming to branch office and showing them my contracts, showing all of the stuff about me, and then being laughed at because I didn't make any real money. I got upset because, well, hey, I pay taxes on it, right? Like how they can tell me that I'm not actually making any money. So I started basically faking having a fiat income. I turned my contract into fiat one. I was the good boy. It took me almost 2 years to build up a credit score, and I went to the bank again. Everything seems fine. They gave me this form which had one extra check mark, which basically said, do you own, are you trading, or are you anyhow exposed to cryptocurrencies? I was like, yeah, well, I just gave you the contracts with the Ethereum Foundation, so the hell I am. So I take that, and boom, that's the end of the story about me getting a mortgage. And I got upset because, well, what the hell, I did everything right, yet I work in this industry that's currently being hated, and that's not really getting the treatment it deserved from the traditional financial institutions. So I was like, screw it, we'll just start our own thing that's focused on the crypto natives. That's focused on people who are already in crypto, who have their wealth in digital assets, and who are here to stay. And that's how we essentially started. And we also wanted to understand, okay, that's our premise. Our premise is there is a big enough market of crypto natives, so let's actually look into the data. Let's look into how deep this market actually is. So I'm going to talk about how do we define the crypto native economy, and we are going to look into the fees that were paid on the different infrastructure chains like L1s, L2s, and some dapps, and then what we can learn from that. This is a too long didn't read of the reports that we publish every year. We already published 3 reports. The last one has over 40 pages. So if this gets you interested, then you'll have a ton of reading afterwards. So what is the crypto native economy? We define it as the economic demand which happens transparently on-chain. So it's essentially the user-paid fees. It's the transaction fees on layer 1, layer 2 blockchains, maybe in the future layer 3s. And it's also the fees that people pay to the dapps, to the protocols which are living on these chains. So decentralized exchanges, LP fees, bridging fees, marketplace fees, royalties, if you will. What's also considered is basically the share on liquid staking, but only the fees part, not the yield. So we're about to mention what we didn't cover, but perhaps should have. So we didn't look into revenues of centralized exchanges, which are happening in their own tracks, in their own bank accounts. We didn't consider any consulting or developer payment fees. We didn't consider DAO paid salaries and DAO treasuries, even though there definitely could be considered part of the crypto native economy, and some of these treasuries are of the size of billions of dollars. And as mentioned, we also didn't really take in any yield from lending or the general liquid staking and validations. We purposefully didn't include mining and token rewards. And obviously that's a big chunk of the potential revenue, as you could perceive the different agents and players in the ecosystem basically making money just on mining or making money from farming airdrops or whatever. But we just don't think this is the sustainable way. So if we want to understand the sustainable part of the economy, we just discounted these, and for the purpose of our report, we don't care. There's few limitations worthwhile to mention. You can also read this into more detail in the report itself. So all of the numbers that you're going to see are denominated in US dollars. Bunch of these protocols are taking a fee in their native currency, so basically the exchange is considered at the time and price of the transaction. So that's one of the major limitations, because a lot of the numbers are following the price action, but we are looking at two parameters. One is the fees, and the second one is the users. So you should kind of be able to abstract from just the price movement. In the last report, we also excluded some minor categories like gaming, prediction markets, and insurance. That's for the lack of data, and also because like the assumption is that these are fairly small now. There's no other reason, it's just not there. So let's look into the 2022 numbers. So in 2022, the fees on L1s range up to $5.44 billion. 80% of that is just Ethereum mainnet, or was just Ethereum mainnet. The dApp fees were about the same size, which already is an interesting aspect. So the fees in dApps were almost 6 billion, and the top 20 dApps are basically covering 87% of all of those fees, out of which just the NFT marketplaces were 43%. So you can see what the NFT hype actually did to the market. The other worthwhile to mention category is DEXs. There was 32% of the fees. The other one, yield aggregators, liquid staking, bit of it is lending, but the majority was actually NFT marketplaces, and the largest chunk of this was OpenSea. So OpenSea in like 2022 actually made something over $1.3 billion just in the fees paid to them as a marketplace, which was, I mean, if you consider the treasuries in some of these DAOs, that actually is a pretty decent return on investment there. So 2023 numbers. What has changed? And again, this is just a too long didn't read. You guys should look into the report and like even validate our data if you feel something is off. So what we concluded, feel free to disagree, is that the 2023 was the year of the bottom. So the bottom happened sometime in like September, October, in terms of the user interest and basically the money being like paid in these on-chain services. The narratives that picked up the most were liquid staking tokens, liquid staking derivatives, and L2s, quite naturally. And the narratives that faded away were metaverse and NFTs. But there is one exception on the NFT side. In the last report, we also added a retrospect on kind of the macro dating like from 2020. So there's the overall like macro trend visible in the last report. So on the layer one side, the revenue, if you will, of the L1s was $4.5 billion. It's roughly 17% drop since 2022. It's not a huge drop considering what was happening with the market, but it's also not really showing that there would be any like major pickup in 2023. Here we compared Ethereum, which basically had the total dominance in 2022 to all of the other L1s combined. So you can say that Ethereum has lost its like major dominance, but there is another interesting aspect that I'm going to dive into just in a few. So this is a comparison since 2020. You basically see the last bull market, 2021, Ethereum made roughly like $10 billion in just fees. 2022, the number was dropping, likewise with all of the other L1s, where Ethereum was actually more stable. And in 2023, the numbers basically like even out. I mean, Ethereum still made the most in terms of L1s, but it's losing the relative dominance. So here you can basically see the movement of the fees like throughout the year, and you can also tell that the user base is pretty much stable. So this is all based on like the price movements, and the conclusion as well is that the user base indeed is like very stable on Ethereum. It's also true for Bitcoin. Here's another very important graph though. So even though Ethereum as an L1 has been losing its like relative dominance in the L1 sector, this is a comparison of transaction count on the Ethereum L2s versus Ethereum as a mainnet. So as you see, like already in February last year, there were more transactions on Ethereum L2s than on the mainnet itself. And if you actually connect all of these numbers all together, then, well, Ethereum is definitely not going anywhere. With Bitcoin, and does anyone have a hunch like what happened in November, December to Bitcoin last year, and why the fees basically made Bitcoin relevant again? Any guesses? Ordinals, yeah. So, well, even though like Bitcoiners might hate ordinals, well, actually, well, if ordinals didn't happen, we wouldn't have Bitcoin in the report because it wouldn't matter. But overall, Bitcoin definitely shows a relatively stable user base over the years. So it's definitely also going to stay here. Again, another comparison of active users, so like monthly active users of Ethereum, relatively stable despite a major drop in the market. And the last year also considers the large movement of people to the L2s. So don't see this as like users are going away. They're just migrating to L2s now. Another interesting contender here is actually Tron. Sorry to break your hearts, like if you're from the Ethereum crowd, but Tron actually shows like significant uptake in users and is actually the second blockchain in terms of user-paid fees on the chain. Bitcoin, again, the most stable user base out there. The fees basically behave or like follow the price movement. 2023 and 2022 numbers would be exactly the same if ordinals didn't happen. BNB chain, likewise as Tron, is actually also having like a decent traction with users. It reports like more monthly active users than Ethereum, but it doesn't have the entire L2 infrastructure. So here is just a letterboard, like these numbers are in millions of dollars. So it's basically Ethereum with $2.4 billion in user-paid fees. There is Tron, there is Bitcoin, BNB, Avalanche, and this is kind of the top 5, and the rest is well, the cheap chains, if you will. But anything beneath Solana, we don't have to talk about because like those are another order of magnitude lower than anything that you see here. So on dapps, there was a bigger drop, $3.4 billion. If Ethereum is the one L1 blockchain, then Uniswap is to DEXs what Ethereum is to L1 blockchains. Definitely had a decent track. It's again the one DEX that rules them all. Liquid staker fees, it's like a new industry. So and that's the one example, the one exception where we actually considered like some portion of validator fees. Or like validator rewards, but just the fee part of it. So this is like how much these protocols keep from the validator fees. Anything wrong with this graph? Any hunch? Glad you asked. Lido is here. So Lido is basically dominating or has dominated the liquid staking fees captured by the protocol itself. Lending protocols, there are basically 3 worth mentioning: Aave, Compound, and Venus. The other ones are relatively growing, like if you consider the data again back to 2022. I'm going to slide through this. NFT marketplaces, that was a big thing in 2022, especially 2021. It's basically a race to zero right now. You can see the uptick in like 2021, 2022. 2 reasons. Well, A, the narrative has faded, but also there was so much competition that it was basically a race to zero for the fees. So fees on these like platforms like dropped to nothing. But the user base like still is somewhat there. It's not as hot as before, definitely, but it's not completely dead market. Definitely cooled down. And now the interesting part, and that's why I think like Ethereum definitely has a lot to offer. These are the L2 fees since 2021. So you basically see like Arbitrum, OP mainnet, ZK Sync, Starknet. They are basically outcompeting anything that's below top 5 of the L1 blockchains, and this is all Ethereum. So the L2 market seems to be actually quite more interesting than a whole lot of the alternative L1s out there. So I'm already over time, I guess, so I'll just quickly conclude. So from the numbers that we see now for 2024, seems like 23 was the bottom. There's a huge migration of people to the L2s, which, I mean, everybody knew. We just like wanted to validate it. Dapp usage went from hype to core, so now we are seeing like liquid staking derivatives like L2s, bridges, and these types of things. User base is steady, so the users actually not necessarily follow the price. There is already a significant amount of users. The fees, though, are kind of following the price. And yeah, as seen with the cases such as like Uniswap, Lido, there's still a huge space and a huge like opportunity in the market to like bring up like new innovative products there. I'll stop here, so you can read the 40 pages of the report. Special thanks to Victor. There's a guy with the cap who essentially wrote the report and like all of the reports. And yeah, if you are interested in reading all of these reports, you can go to pond.xyz or cryptonative.pond.xyz. You can scan the QR code as well, and you can read the reports there. Let us know if you agree, if you disagree, if there's something else that you would like to see. We definitely want to dive more into now the Bitcoin L2s and like the data that we perhaps like didn't cover but should have. And yeah, that's it from my end. And don't forget, Banks 82.